When Jamal Brooks was 10 years old, he carried his science notebook to school every single day, itching for the moment he could present his ideas to someone who might understand them. He lived in a cramped two-bedroom apartment above his Aunt Louise's hair salon on the south side of Chicago, a space perfumed by the mingling scents of shampoos and singed hair. After school, he climbed the narrow staircase to the small back bedroom that he and his younger sister, Maya, shared. There, beneath the glow of a single desk lamp connected to an extension cord that trailed across the floor, he conducted experiments, mixing baking soda and vinegar to power miniature balloon rockets, testing conductivity by completing small circuits with pennies and copper wire, observing how different colored cellophane filters altered the spectrum of sunlight beaming through a plastic magnifying lens. Every day, he scribbled observations into his well-worn notebook, labeling diagrams with large, earnest letters, and occasionally scribbling a note to himself like, "Test next with charcoal," or "Ask Mrs. Ellison about galvanic cells." In his mind, each page held the promise of new discoveries. Each experiment, the seed of something world-changing. Mrs. Ellison, his sixth-grade science teacher at Westwood Middle School, was widely regarded as one of the finest educators in the district. Her classroom walls were covered with laminated certificates, newspaper clippings extolling her teaching methods, and photographs of her attending national conferences. She was a slim woman with crisply styled steel gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses that slid down her nose whenever she squinted at something too small to see. Rumor had it, she once won a Teacher of the Year award for the entire state of Illinois. For Jamal, she represented the epitome of scientific authority, an unassailable figure who could unravel any mystery with a well-chosen explanation. On the first day of sixth grade, Jamal clutched his notebook in trembling hands and approached her desk at the end of class, when the room was emptying out. "Mrs. Ellison," he said softly, voice catching at the edges, "can I show you my project idea?" He held out the dog-eared notebook, its cover stiff from tape and repair. His humanitarian heart stuttered with hope that she might see a glimpse of brilliance in his design, a homemade water filtration system crafted from a series of terracotta pots layered with gravel, sand, and activated charcoal. He imagined her approval lighting up her eyes, guiding him towards scientific greatness. Mrs. Ellison glanced at the notebook, her brow furrowing in what Jamal perceived as thinly veiled exasperation. She raised her eyes, took in his threadbare t-shirt and patched jeans, and closed the notebook with a soft, dismissive thud. She then placed it on the corner of her desk. "Jamal, I appreciate your enthusiasm," she said, voice polite but cold. "However, we are focusing on standard lab experiments this semester, and I don't have time to supervise personal projects. Maybe next semester." The corners of her lips twitched in a polite smile that did not reach her eyes. "Thank you for asking. Now, please return to your seat." Her pen scratched across a pop quiz she was grading, a signal that the conversation was over. Jamal's palms went cold all at once, as though someone had inverted his blood. He nodded in recognition of her curt dismissal and shuffled back to his seat, arms encircling the notebook like a shield. Each word of her refusal felt like a knock on his budding confidence. He sank into his chair and stared at the keyboard diagrams drawn on the whiteboard, trying to steady his breathing. When the final bell rang, he picked up his backpack and limped through the crowded hallway, the echo of students laughing and locker doors slamming reverberating off the corridor walls. Having his idea rejected over what felt like the decidedly irrelevant matter of his background stung more sharply than any scraped knee. In that moment, he understood with sudden clarity that his school would not be the place that nurtured his dreams. He would have to forge his own path. At home, the small apartment was warm with the hum of the air conditioning, and his aunt, dressed in a brightly colored smock, was braiding one customer's hair while chatting amiably with another. Lana, his 8-year-old sister, was seated at the tiny purchase table, flipping through the latest issue of Natural Geographic Kids. When he stepped through the door, clutching his notebook under his arm, his aunt called out, "Jamal, how was school?" He gave her a tentative smile, but she sensed his silence. "Something wrong?" She pressed gently. He shook his head, shuffled to their shared desk, and set the notebook down. His fingers traced the tattered edges of the cover, as he recounted Mrs. Ellison's dismissive words in a whisper. Aunt Louise's eyes softened. She knelt beside him and placed her hand over his. "Mama used to say that sometimes the people who don't see your vision just aren't ready to. But you keep going, okay?" She squeezed his hand, then rose, returning to the salon and its comforting buzz of dryers and scissors. Jamal retreated to his corner, opened his notebook, and penned a new note at the top of a blank page in bold letters. "Find a way." I will prove her wrong. Late that night, he filled the pages with calculations, pore sizes in charcoal, flow rates of water, cost estimates, sketches of a cylindrical core containing multiple layers of filtration. Sometimes he heard his aunt calling him for dinner, sometimes the sound of security guards patrolling the hallway below. Yet in that quiet, his determination flickered brighter than any streetlight. He vowed that one day she would see the merit of his ideas. In seventh grade, Jamal's passion for science matured into a quieter resolve. He became less inclined to volunteer in class, bearing his genius beneath tight lips and slouched shoulders. He performed well on quizzes. Answers to chemical equations and physics problems arrived at him as though by instinct, but rarely raised his hand. He joined the Science Olympiad team, where he worked furiously with his partner, Luis, a lanky classmate with a love for robotics, to construct balloon-powered cars and orbit models. They spent weekends in Luis's basement, soldering motor kits, testing thrust angles, tweaking wheels until their contraption moved in a straight line and held its own against competing designs. Both boys felt a thrill whenever their cars edged ahead on the plywood ramp. At the regional competition, they placed third, and as their teacher, Ms. Harding, pinned the bronze medal around Jamal's neck, her praise felt genuine and not stained by the social biases that had tinted Mrs. Ellison's view. For those few hours, he tasted a fleeting sense of belonging. He brought a team photo to Aunt Louise, who exclaimed, "Look at my scientist! That blue ribbon suits you, baby." She hugged him tight and displayed the picture prominently on the refrigerator door. Despite the honor, Jamal concealed his longing for Mrs. Ellison's approval. He believed that if she had recognized his talent, surely the world would too. But acceptance in Ms. Harding's eyes sufficed for a while, helping him keep despair at bay. By eighth grade, the school district announced a prestigious innovation challenge, open to all middle school students. The top submissions would earn grants and mentorship at a local university lab. Jamal spent weeks refining his water filtration design, incorporating a solar disinfection component, a curved array of reflective aluminum panels guiding sunlight into a small submerged chamber lined with glass tubes to heat water to the bacteria-killing threshold. He tested prototypes over summer break, first with murky rainwater in old plastic jugs, later with water he collected from the train station's drainage. He measured turbidity with his dad's old water testing kit, culled from garage drawers, and monitored pH levels with the litmus strips. His sketches documented each upgrade: a braided rope harness for the filter chamber, a faster solar focus cone, a protective mesh screen to keep out debris. On the day he submitted his proposal, he wrote a cover letter addressed to the Innovation Committee, telling them about the shortages of clean water he observed near the local park and how his device could be a low-cost solution for remote huts in Lake County. Then he carried the entire thick stack of blueprints, calculations, and typed narrative to Ms. Harding for final review. When she read his proposal, she exhaled with admiration. "This is outstanding, Jamal. You've really thought through the engineering costs and implementation. If I were one of the judges, I'd pick this immediately." Her encouragement filled him with hope. Maybe, if he met the right audience, doors would open. He sent off the packet, dreams buoyed by the possibility of real funding and lab mentorship. When the awards ceremony arrived, the gymnasium was crowded with parents, teachers, and students, each holding packets of project documentation. The principal, Mr. Vasquez, introduced the winners from each category: robotics, environmental engineering, computer science. Jamal sat near Luis, their hands pressed together in nervous anticipation. When the environmental engineering category was announced, he leaned forward as the announcer said, "Third place awarded to Taylor Nguyen from Eastwood Middle School for her hydroponic garden design." Polite applause. Second place goes to Cameron Lee for his biofuel converter that recycles kitchen grease. Scattered claps. And first place, with a unanimous vote by the judges, goes to Lucia Ramirez of Oak Park Academy for her water purification drones. Thunderous applause. Jamal's chest fell. He asked the student next to him if he knew Cameron or Lucia, and the boy shook his head, adding, "Your project must have been good, though." Everyone was talking about how Jamal's filter was so detailed. Jamal offered a weak smile, his mind swirling. So close, yet it just wasn't enough. As Lucia mounted the stage to claim her certificate and a small trophy, Jamal felt a knot tightening in his throat. He rose from the bleachers silently, not caring if anyone noticed, packed his proposal and sketches into his backpack, and strode out of the gym, sweat pooling under the gym lights and tears threatening to spill. Outside, dusk was settling over the schoolyard. He leaned against the chain-link fence, watching students file past, their morning sneakers scuffing the ground. He thought of how Mrs. Ellison had scoffed at his idea, how Miss Harding had praised but could not empower victory, and how each adult voice in his life had either rejected or gently brushed aside his ambitions. A sudden wind caught at the leaves of a nearby oak, and a swirl of yellow and brown fluttered around him. He felt a pulse of frustration. Why does nobody trust me? He let the question hang in the dimming air, then turned toward home, head bowed in solemn resignation. During his freshman year of high school at Bronzeville Academy, the sting of past rejections still lingered, but he discovered new outlets. He joined the robotics club, where he met Shauna and DeAndre, two peers with shared fascination for electronics. While his peers in the hallways recited lyrics from the latest rap song, Jamal was learning to write Python code for Raspberry Pi microcontrollers, building sensor arrays to detect ambient light and temperature. He spent Fridays after school in the workshop, soldering sensor boards, designing printed circuit boards on the computer lab's CAD software, and occasionally noticing the glance of the resource officer passing by, unimpressed by his concentration. His social circle was small, but lunch table conversations were electric. They debated Arduino versus Raspberry Pi and swapped stories about underwater drones and 3D printing. When the annual Chicago Youth Tech Expo rolled around, his team placed second with their drone-powered air quality monitor, an apparatus carrying sensors that measured particulate matter above busy intersections. Though it fell short of first place, he felt a spark of pride. His project had been chosen from the dozens of entries across the city, and he assigned each minor success a quiet victory note in his heart. Still, the memory of sixth grade remained a shadow. Each time he enrolled in a new teacher's class, he wondered if she would regard his proposals as too ambitious or not fitting the textbook. In his sophomore year, his biology teacher, Ms. Patel, encouraged him to apply for a summer internship at the Chicago Science Center, one of the most prestigious programs for high school students interested in STEM. "You'd fit right in," she said with a confident smile. "Your proposals are creative. Your persistence is rare." When the letter arrived confirming his acceptance, he was overjoyed. He spent that summer working with researchers on a neural network project, running simulations to predict waterborne disease outbreaks based on climate data. He arrived each morning at the lab in a crisp polo shirt and khaki pants, an image a world away from the boy in patched jeans shunned by Mrs. Ellison. Occasionally he thought of her, wondering if she'd be proud to know how far he'd come. He pushed the thought aside and refocused on his data models, on the hum of servers, on the steady glow of monitors, tracking outbreaks in real time. As the summer waned, he prepared to return to the Science Center one last time. His mentor, Dr. Harrison, offered him a letter of recommendation to apply to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign's College of Engineering. "You have raw talent, Jamal," Dr. Harrison said. "You just need the resources and belief to push yourself. Never let a single rejection define you." Dr. Harrison's words echoed in his mind as he packed his notebook full of data, sketches, and research plans. By fall of his senior year, he was holding his acceptance letter to UIUC, boasting a full scholarship to study environmental engineering. His aunt snapped a photo of him in his cap and gown on graduation day, beaming at him through the camera lens, her pride as potent as any chemical reaction. When she latched onto his shoulder and said, "I knew you could do it, baby," he felt tears rise and nodded, thinking back to each moment of doubt that had brought him here. On the morning he left for college, Aunt Louise reminded him about the family tradition. Each graduate takes a small memento of home for luck. He considered a miniature toy car from his childhood, the first toy he had ever built from scratch, wheels turned by rubber bands. But instead he chose a faded photo of his sixth grade class. He flipped it over and wrote, "To Mrs. Ellison, teach well, see beyond your world, bend for those who need your eyes to open." He tucked it gently into his suitcase. At UIUC, he arrived on the sprawling green campus under a sky of pale autumn light. His dorm room, though small, felt capacious with possibility. He unpacked and taped the class photo onto the corkboard above his desk, a small stern reminder that no matter how far he traveled, his story began there. His first class was an introductory engineering course, taught by Dr. Nguyen, who spoke of thermodynamics and civil infrastructure with the eloquence of a poet. Jamal sat at the front row, eyes fixed on the professor, absorbing every diagram. When class ended, Dr. Nguyen announced that she would be selecting students for a summer research project at Argonne National Laboratory. Submit your applications by Friday, she said. Your essays should reflect your passions and any unique perspectives you bring to the field. On a crisp October evening, sitting under the glow of a desk lamp, Jamal typed a heartfelt application. He wrote of his childhood lab in a cramped corner of a South Side apartment, of Mrs. Ellison's dismissal, and how he had turned those early setbacks into motivation to prove that any idea, no matter how young its inventor, could hold transformative power. He attached his transcript, straight A's in physics and chemistry, and his research summary from his summer internship. He added a note: I aspire to design sustainable water treatment systems for underserved communities. My experiences have shown me that talent is not dictated by background. Brilliance can arise anywhere. He submitted the application, closed his laptop, and sent a silent prayer into the night. When he received the acceptance letter to Argonne in April, his dorm mates cheered, and he called his aunt in glee. Aunt Louise's voice trembled with tears as she congratulated him. He had done it. Another doorstep passed. Another rejection turned into a stepping stone. In the summer of 2023, he arrived at Argonne, greeted by gleaming labs and towering office complexes. He worked on a project to develop more efficient solar desalination modules, flat panels leveraging nanomaterial coatings to evaporate seawater at lower temperatures. The research team's every day was a dance of instruments humming, computer monitors flickering, and graduate students debating data in hushed tones. He learned to navigate the layers of review committees, to present compelling research updates, and to fund proposals citing existing studies. He stayed late well past sunset, enraptured by the hum of experiment, the smell of solvents swirling in fume hoods, and the quiet camaraderie of colleagues who shared his passion. He wondered if Mrs. Ellison knew that the boy she once brushed aside was now crafting modules that might one day provide clean water to entire coastal communities. By fall semester 2023, he returned to campus for his junior year, forging bonds with classmates, many from backgrounds like his, studying sustainable infrastructure, and joining the on-campus chapter of Engineers Without Borders. He teamed with them to propose a project in rural Kenya to install community-scale water purification units modeled after his earlier prototypes. The proposal, co-written and defended before a panel of professors, drew on his expertise and experiences. When they received funding from the university's Global Engagement Office, he celebrated with his teammates, knowing that his past struggles had given him empathy and perspective to build these solutions. At home, Aunt Louise pinned every article about his achievements on the refrigerator door, a campus newsletter featuring him as a rising star in environmental engineering, a local Chicago Tribune piece on his work at Argonne, and a brief mention in an alumni magazine profiling scholarship recipients, making a difference. His achievements felt like a tapestry, each thread woven from moments where belief overcame adversity. During winter break of his senior year in 2024, he earned acceptance to Villanova University's PhD program in civil and environmental engineering, with a research grant earmarked for water resource sustainability. He opened the letter in his aunt's kitchen under the low hum of Christmas lights strung across the window pane. Aunt Louise hugged him fiercely, murmuring over and over, "My baby, my baby." He marveled that the boy who once stood rejected in a sixth-grade classroom now held letters granting him advanced study at a top-tier institution. In spring of 2025, he launched a blueprint for the Bronzeville Science and Innovation Center, a 10,000-square-foot facility combining community classrooms, a water testing lab, a makerspace, and an exhibit hall honoring local educators. He collaborated with city officials, his university mentors, and philanthropic foundations to secure funding. The design featured a central atrium with skylights that filtered sunlight onto indoor planters, irrigated by recycled gray water. Solar panels and rainwater harvesting systems adorned the roof. Inside, rotating exhibitions showcased youth-led research on water quality, a live aquarium demonstrating the effect of pollutants on aquatic life, and interactive modules where visitors could test small samples of water for bacterial content. A glass-fronted inventors gallery bore plaques and photographs chronicling student projects from local schools, hovercraft prototypes, solar cookers, and yes, a full-scale improved version of Jamal's first water filter idea. The final display was dedicated to pioneers of inspiration, and he was asked to curate the teachers section. When he drafted the plaque for that exhibit, he wrote about teachers who saw potential where others saw distraction. Mr. Henderson, who guided him through his first robotics competition, Ms. Patel, who urged him toward internship opportunities. And finally, the cohort from Westwood Middle, Mrs. Eleanor Ellison, Recognizing Innovation Beyond Appearances, 2010. It read in part, though initially dismissive, Mrs. Ellison's eventual acknowledgement of what followed reminded us that sometimes the humblest beginnings kindle the most transformative journeys. Her presence among these honored educators demonstrates that every teacher's influence bears seeds of change, even when its impact requires time to bloom. On a crisp September morning in 2025, the Bronzeville Science and Innovation Center held its grand opening. A red, blue, and yellow ribbon stretched across the main doors, flanked by rows of chairs bearing community members, government officials, and educators. As Jamal delivered the keynote speech, voiced with the steady confidence of someone who had weathered countless rejections, he could see in the second row, seated next to his aunt, a figure he recognized immediately. Mrs. Ellison, older now, her steel gray hair tied in a tidy bun, wearing a navy blue blazer over a floral blouse. Her posture was erect, eyes fixed on him with a complexity of emotion he could not immediately discern. He spoke about innovation born from adversity, detailing how his early experiments in a cramped bedroom led to global research, and how the community center now stood as tangible proof that no idea is too small to matter. Item by item, he described the space: the water testing lab, where residents could bring samples from their taps for immediate analysis; the makerspace with 3D printers available for students exploring prototypes; and the exhibit hall celebrating local heroes, young men and women who had risen from similar backgrounds to solve real-world problems. He punctuated each section with gratitude for the village of support that had lifted him: his aunt's unwavering faith, Ms. Harding's early encouragement, his college mentors, and the sponsors who believed in community-based innovation. When he concluded with a sentence about how every teacher's role, however small, can reverberate across generations, the crowd rose in unified applause. Among the standing ovation, his gaze met Mrs. Ellison's, now brimming with tears, and he nodded, sharing a silent acknowledgement of the distance they had traveled from that first rejection. As visitors filed into the center to explore its interactive exhibits, Mrs. Ellison approached him quietly. They stood amid the vibrant bustle, children scanning water samples at a countertop, a local science teacher demonstrating pH tests to a group of sixth graders, and the gentle hum of computers as young innovators drafted new proposals. She handed him the ribbon from the opening ceremony, a small symbolic gesture, knowing that she couldn't cut it earlier, and said, her voice trembling, "I'm sorry, Jamal. I was wrong. Thank you for not giving up." Jamal's throat tightened. He placed one hand on her forearm and offered a gentle, forgiving smile. "Thank you for saying that. Every moment before that helped me find my own path. You taught me an unintended lesson, that rejection can become motivation if we let it." Mrs. Ellison nodded, patting his forearm, her eyes glistening. He could see in her expression the quiet pride of a teacher who finally understood that every student's spark, even when buried beneath circumstance, was worth honoring. He turned back to the exhibit, where a display case featured Mrs. Ellison's awards: 2010 Illinois Teacher of the Year and Excellence in STEM Education, Chicago District 299. Beneath the awards, a small engraved plaque read, "Mrs. Eleanor Ellison, for lane crossing vision, guiding students beyond their circumstances." He watched as young visitors pointed at the awards, reading the plaque and jotting down notes in their sketchbooks. In that moment, he realized that her recognition no longer felt hollow. Instead, it shone with new sincerity, a testament not to perfection, but to growth and redemption. On that early autumn day, as the sun cast warm light through the center's floor-to-ceiling windows, Jamal felt a swell of peace and purpose. He had begun as a boy whose ideas were dismissed because of who he was and where he came from. Yet he'd refused to allow that rejection to extinguish his curiosity. Instead, he had allowed it to refine his resolve, channeling disappointment into determination, doubt into discovery. Now, standing amid the hubbub of youthful excitement and shared dreams, he recognized that every spark, nurtured over time, can ignite forces far greater than the boundaries one begins with. And as he watched a group of children gather around a model water purifier he had designed years ago, he knew that his journey, one forged by rejection, had ultimately opened doors for countless others. And so, in a world that often overlooks the quiet brilliance of ordinary beginnings, he had created a space where every idea, in every form, could find recognition, support, and the chance to become extraordinary.